a couple months ago, I've been coming up and walking the dogs here, and I started thinking about, you know, what was happening in our area with the animals, and the whole idea of a no-kill shelter, things like that, and started having a conversation around the community and about where we are with those types of issues, which led me to you. And also it also made me aware that there was sort of an intense history in the community with the shelter, and gradually, over a short period of time, a group of people got together who wanted to start bringing more support to the animals in the community, and one of those people invited you to our first meeting. Heidi's the president of the board of the High Desert Humane Society here, and you came to our first meeting, which was the first time I met you out apart from here, and you shared somewhat of the history of the Humane Society and the shelter and pound and how they all came to sort of get blended, and it was fascinating. And you also came to our second meeting, and we ended up talking about some really great things we all want to do together into the future. So we decided to have a little interview. I thought it would be great for the community to learn more about the history of the High Desert Humane Society and what's taken place sort of through time up until now. And ultimately, I'd love to hear some things about your vision for the future and some of the projects you're working on. And our group, just to mention too, we just named ourselves for the Animal Friends of New Mexico, and so we're excited to work with you into the future. And we're just a group of volunteers who are volunteering our time and our energy and resources and stuff because we love animals, and we just want to kind of work with you and different groups and individuals and programs around the area that are working to help our little furry friends. So with that, would you like to
Well, as you said, my name's Heidi Sexton, and I've been with this Humane Society since 2005. I started volunteering down here, and I've been on the board shortly after that. I came on the board, and I've been president for 6 years now. This is my 6th term. And a little bit of history about the Humane Society. In the early 70s, the city pound was a cinder block enclosure down by the old sewer plant, which is down below where the golf course is now, and it was open to the elements, and it was not uncommon for animals to freeze to death there in the wintertime. And a couple of citizens here in Silver City decided that that was unacceptable, and they wanted to do something about that. And one particular lady, Doris Rominger, she set up a card table in her garage and got a shoebox as a filing cabinet and began taking in animals and trying to find homes for them so that they didn't have to stay in this enclosure. And in 1973, with a group of another bunch of people, they formed the actual Humane Society and became an incorporated business at that point.
So the goal at that point was to shelter animals and
help adopt them out, find something. The city pound did nothing as far as adoptions or animal care. All they did was pick up impounded or stray animals, take them to the facility. An owner had 3 days to come look for their animal and claim it, and if it wasn't claimed, it was euthanized. There was no adoption, there was no educational promotion, there was no spay and neuter programs, nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. It was just strictly an impoundment facility. And the county didn't really have anything at the time, and so the county, in 1974, the Humane Society that had formed approached the city and talked them into turning all the care of the animals over to them. So there was no more city pound at that point.
Okay.
There was no more city pound. All the animals came into the Humane Society, and they began a contract then. And over the years, bookkeeping-wise and function-wise, the Humane Society, who operates the animal shelter for the city and the county, is a separate function. It's a completely separate function.
And so why did you guys keep it separate? Was it just because of business, or?
Partially because of business and record keeping, but because the Humane Society has one particular goal. and the ordinances and animal control throughout the community has a little bit of a different mission. And because the Humane Society is a nonprofit organization, and the Humane Society itself and its function is 100% funded by donation and fundraisers.
Okay.
The animal control, which is the animal shelter / pound, if you want to call it that, as much as I don't like that word, that is funded by the city and by the county. The city pays us to house animals in the shelter in compliance with the city ordinance.
Okay.
And the county does the same, but also asks that we provide 40 hours a week of animal control service.
Okay.
So we have one person that covers the whole entire county, plus one person that's overseas.
So they're actually funded through the Humane Society, the control for the county?
No, that's paid for by the county.
That's under your contract?
Yeah, under our contract we provide 40 hours of animal control, and we house the animals in accordance with the ordinance.
And so if you were to distinguish the difference between the Humane Society in terms of your goals and functions and identity versus the sort of the job, the contract you do, and the job you carry out with the shelter / pound for the county and the city.
Okay, so the pound or the shelter side of it, if an animal's running at large or found as a stray running around town, or if an owner just can't keep their animal anymore, it comes into the shelter or the pound.
Okay.
And if it's stray or impounded and we don't know who the owner is, it's nobody's property but the owner, even though we don't know who that is at this point. So the animal, depending on whether it's city or county, has to stay in that facility for 3 to 5 days.
Okay.
That gives the owner the opportunity to come claim it. That also gives a good time to evaluate the animal and find out, if there's any health issues, if it's scared, if it's vicious, if there's, any issues with the animal. If it's not claimed and it appears to be a good adoptable animal, then the ownership is transferred to the Humane Society. And the Humane Society does adoptions, the Humane Society does the spay and neuter halt program, the Humane Society does the emergency preparedness in the community for other animals. The Humane Society has a completely different function.
I see. So the pound is more kind of like a holding tank for strays, and then you guys, because you wanted originally and still do, your goal was to shelter and facilitate some kind of adoption or helping with the issues with the animals in general. You end up kind of inheriting some of the animals that come in as strays who don't end up getting taken back by their owners to their homes.
Right.
And so how do you, so how comfortable, I know we spoke briefly at our meeting about some of the pros and cons of that merging and some of the limitations that you might feel, or some of the things that have kind of encumbered your vision in some ways around because of the blending of the two, or? Yes,
it is difficult because the shelter side of it, the impoundment side, is the side that the community doesn't really want to know about. It's not just my dog Spot that got out of my yard. It's abused animals. It's animals people don't want anymore. It's vicious animals that people can't keep anymore. And the unfortunate side is a shelter or impoundment facility like that will most never be a no-kill facility. Whereas the Humane Society, although they have to be selective about what they bring in, there's the potential of no adoptable animal ever being euthanized through the Humane Society. But the Humane Society can't take in sick animals, and they can't take in vicious animals. The shelter has to manage those animals.
Okay.
So the unfortunate side is, and the Humane Society considered this, is what would happen if they didn't do the pound anymore. Because then the Humane Society could really flourish as what they want to in the way of adoptions and education.
Because mostly because of the nature of the population of the pound is typically behavioral issues, much more so, because the Humane Society, when somebody comes up here to even relinquish a dog to the Humane Society and it's their own dog, they tend to not have nearly as many behavioral
Correct.
problems. It might just be the person's moving, or
Right.
or someone isn't able to care for their
Right.
animal anymore. Where the impound dog, the dogs that are brought in to the pound typically are going to have, like, percentage-wise, you'd say they have a much higher rate of lower adoption probability.
I think it's probably equal, because there are a lot of good dogs out there that are running loose, and maybe somebody just assumed it got hit by a car or somebody stole it, so they don't necessarily come looking for it.
Okay.
And they're good animals that can move into the Humane Society for adoption.
Okay.
So I would say...
So where does the struggle end up, where suddenly what the Humane Society would like to ultimately do, or is capable of doing, where does it become burdened by the shelter pound?
Well, because we do not turn away anything. Nothing is turned away. Anything, if it's sick, if it's injured, if it's vicious, if it has mental illness, behavioral issues, we take in everything. And the unfortunate reality is that some of those animals, you know, it's easy to say, well, all animals can be rehabilitated or all animals can be healed, and I agree with that, but it takes talent and time and education and money, and unfortunately, you know, in an ideal world, that would be what we really want.
Right.
But in reality, there's not money, there's not people, there's not facilities that can really rehabilitate, you know, say a vicious Chihuahua or a vicious Pit Bull.
Right.
It's very, very difficult, and so the burden is that those are the animals that end up being euthanized because there's no place for them to go.
So when you look at the overall euthanasia rate or statistics for this whole combined organization, the larger portion is the pound shelter, and that's what makes it feel like it kind of takes away from the Humane Society being able to really embrace that mission.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe if the pound shelter issue had more support come toward it, if the issues are more complex, that could alleviate some of the size of the rate in that area?
Well,
or does it seem like it's really hard to keep the two things together and shoot for that goal?
Well, I think, you know, of course, this may be a little far-fetched and dreaming, but I think, number one, first of all, if people realize that there is a need, unfortunately, for the pound. There is a need for it. I wish we could make all pet owners be responsible and all animals be healthy, but the reality is that can't happen. And I think if the community were more aware, as far as the High Desert Humane Society is concerned, if they were more aware that somebody's got to be the pound here. The city doesn't have a pound anymore, and the county doesn't have a pound. So like I said, let's just say that the Humane Society decided not to do that anymore and just be the Humane Society and just take in adoptable animals. Where would these other animals go?
Right.
Where would it's easy to say, oh well, this city can have a tax and we'll build a facility and we'll but it's still going to be a pound. They're still going to have to deal with the unwanted animals, which may be wonderful pets. They may be pets with behavior issues. They may be sick and injured pets. Somebody has to deal with it, and so part of our reason for not stopping the pound end of it is that there is nobody else, and our mission is to care for companion animals in the community.
So if you were to see, I have a couple questions around that. Like, so if you were separated out from that responsibility as the Humane Society, how would that change things for all of you at the Humane Society in terms of the work you're doing?
Well, I think if we didn't have the pound side of it, we could take in only animals that we knew could easily be adopted, and of course our euthanasia could be almost zero.
Wow.
Like I said, the unfortunate...
And you'd have more space as well. Is that part of the euthanasia issue? Is the amount of space you have?
Yeah, it can become an issue. Of course, when the selection's made, you know, the health of an animal is considered first.
And then it's also just the amount of animals you're dealing with.
Yeah,
it seems like.
Yeah, there are times when we're full. We're full. And when I first started working in humane societies, and I've been volunteering for humane societies for almost 40 years, but when I first started working, I always thought, well, we'll just build a bigger shelter, and we'll just build a bigger shelter, and we'll build even a bigger one. And the unfortunate reality is, you know, the adoption rate pretty much is what it is for any size of a community. There are people that want to own animals, and they will come seek animals for adoption or for purchase. There are people that want to own animals and can't for whatever reason. They live in an apartment, or they have small kids, or, you know, whatever their reason is. And there are people that just don't want to own an animal. So you're adopting a number of people in a community that really want to own animals and can own animals sort of is what it is.
It's like a percentage of the population.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm sure there's some statistic out there that gives that, but you know, when I kept saying, oh, we can just make it bigger, what would happen is we would end up having more animals housed longer. And that would not necessarily solve the problem. Even though, I mean, you can provide food and water and love and walking, but the reality is they're still in a cage 20 hours a day. And that's not a life for a companion animal. So if you want to get to the real root cause of this is spaying and neutering and stopping the unwanted and irresponsible and accidental pregnancies of animals. And
would you say a large portion of the pound animals are coming out of that issue as well?
Or
it's just
Oh yeah.
So have you ever thought, you've probably thought through a lot of these different things through the years, but if the pound/shelter were to sort of split out and function, become an entity that began to sort of be responsible for itself in a different kind of a way, is the contract money that comes in enough to cover something like that? Do you know what I mean? With like if you were to kind of split that out, and then people came forward, or there are people who, or even the city or county or something, came forward to begin to address all those issues separately. Is there funding that goes to that? That's enough.
I guess that would work. I guess that would be a question you'd have to ask the city and county. What the city and county pay to have the shelter function is far less than what they would pay if they had their own facility with their own employees managing it.
Would there be a way to maybe even split out the responsibilities so it was more distinguished, you know what I'm saying, so that you guys could feel free to begin to follow what you want, and more resources came in to address the issues that were really related to the pound shelter population? Is that what kind of thing, what have you thought of in terms of possible ways where you guys would be unburdened of the things that feel so burdensome that they weigh you down from even feeling like you can really do what you know you could do, and also where this other population of dogs got the resources brought toward them that could actually begin to address the issues that they face?
Well, I think it's sort of it's all-encompassing
because it's been woven together.
Well, and I think, like I said, I think the largest problem is the number of dogs and cats that we have unintentionally out there.
Okay.
Even responsible breeders add to the population, and it's unfortunate that we get a lot of purebred animals in here that don't have homes, and that's an unfortunate reality. But if we could educate the public better on the importance of spaying and neutering, so that we could start reducing some of the unwanted pregnancies and unplanned pregnancies that come in. I think also if we can educate people on the responsibilities of pet ownership, because sometimes responsible pet ownership is not having a pet.
Yes.
You know, if you can't take care of it, and you can't feed it, and you can't walk it, and you can't love it correctly, then you're better off not having that pet. And I think if we could educate the community better in what that really involves, and the responsibility that goes with it, whether it's a dog or a cat or another animal, and get them to understand health-wise what's good for the animal, and the responsibility of it, that we would probably see a big reduction in the unwanted animals and the homeless animals.
So it actually feels to you like you guys could continue to be one entity in a certain way, but the community or different resources come forward to help support the work to that more difficult population, and also that people begin to understand. I think a big problem has been in this area, from just touching into this subject, which I had never even looked toward before recently, is that there's been a lot of misunderstanding. So it's like you guys have been sort of accused or condemned as just choosing to kill a bunch of animals, and when that's not the case at all. But I think that the distortion has come from the lack of understanding that you guys inherited this more difficult population of animals without being able to really without having the resources to really tend to those needs. Like you might need some more staff or more funding, or like you're saying, you're continually developing programs that are kind of created to really address the underlying issues and making progress in that way, and that it would probably be really helpful, to you guys, for just the community to sort of back off a little psychically even and emotionally, and begin to have a more loving and honoring relationship with you in terms of what you are doing and what your real goal is, and that alone could make you guys could continue to be providing the shelter pound and tending to that, since the infrastructure is already in place. But just to not have just that one thing that you could probably make a difference, I would imagine, just from what I've seen. Yeah. And I also think that I've noticed, just me touching into this subject and having, a conversation even on the local forum there, how many people share your vision and want to save the animals and have all kinds of desires to come forward and participate with that. And it's exciting. I mean, working with you to the little bit that I have. You're wonderful. You're totally enthusiastic. You completely bridge everything to us. You've shared great ideas, and we're all thrilled to even have an idea of where to begin.